Hello, glad to see you on my channel. I really value it. And today I want to share with you a wonderful story. It's a dramatic story that will come as a total shock to everybody. It is a really amazing story. So enjoy watching it.
Diana helped her father out of the cab and into the wheelchair. Ivan noticed the sadness on his daughter's face and cautiously asked, "Are you upset about something?" "No, Dad, I'm fine. I'm just thinking a little," Diana answered hastily. "But I can see that something is eating you," continued the father, obviously wanting to know the truth of her gloomy mood. "The wedding preparations have worn me out, so I'm down," Diana said and looked at her father. "It's a thing that should be rushed," said her father cheerfully. "But you should be happy you're marrying Dustin." "Dad, I am honestly," Diana said, barely holding back her tears. "Okay, I'm not gonna ask you any more questions," Evan concluded. "You really are exhausted and you need some rest. Help me up to the apartment because Elizabeth is busy today." "It's good that the neighbor is helping. God bless her good health." Diana rolled the chair into the entrance and then into the elevator, which took them to the 7th floor. Opening the door to the apartment, she wheeled her father in, and while he took off his outer clothing, she crossed herself a couple times. What that could mean remained a mystery for now. Turning to face his daughter, Evan said, "Let's cook dinner together tonight." "Okay, Dad, whatever you say." The wedding preparations were really wearing her out. Dustin, the groom, kept changing his mind about what his bride should wear. Diana didn't like it, but she tried not to clash with him. She did everything she could to make Dustin happy. Not only that, she looked like the happiest girl in the world. Her fiancé turned out to be the son of a well-known surgeon in town. Dustin bragged about his status and made the most of it. He organized drinking parties and got into all sorts of trouble, but thanks to his surgeon father's acquaintances, he always got away with it. However, there is a limit to everything, and it came on the eve of the wedding. The fact is that Diana was forced to marry him. She agreed because she was promised the most expensive thing to cure her father. However, when the unpleasant facts were revealed, Diana decided to take revenge, especially since there was a reason, and chose for this wedding, which was to take place immediately after the graduation party at the university. All this time, the girl carefully prepared, visited the beauty salon, where she was literally licked, chose a dress and shoes, and then, under the supervision of Dustin, and condescended to all the machinations of her fiancé. After preparing a light dinner with her father, Diane took a quick bite and called Dustin. "I'm staying at my dad's and I'll be there tomorrow." "Okay, but don't be late," Dustin answered and disconnected the phone. Her fiancé had let her stay at her father's house, which wasn't like him. Diane expected him to grumble and tell her she belonged in his house. But no, Dustin reacted calmly and didn't make a jealous scene. It was almost as if he was glad his fiancé wasn't with him. On the other hand, don't you ever need a break? Diana was tired of listening to him whine about traditions and rules. Suddenly, she remembered all the events leading up to the wedding. Lately, her support had been her disabled father, who had been seriously wounded in a combat deployment. He had served in the airborne forces for many years and was proud to represent such troops. After retirement, old injuries in the form of shrapnel in his spine played havoc with him. Evan was partially paralyzed, and it happened at a time in his life when Diane's mom, Maddie, was diagnosed with cancer. For the retired paratrooper, his wife's severe illness was a real blow. He threw everything he had into saving Maddie, but the doctors did not give any prognosis and only idly waved their hands. They said that medicine was not a fairy tale kingdom and could not work miracles. But Evan kept hoping and traveled with his wife to different medical facilities. Soon Maddie got even worse, and she, having not lived to her 45th birthday for only a week, died. Nor did his beloved wife, and he vowed to do everything he could to make sure his daughter would never, ever need anything. Diana realized that Daddy was doing his best for her, so did not demand from him what he could not give her. Former co-workers helped him, but the family still did not have enough money. Diana often came to school in worn-out clothes. She was given away by relatives, kind neighbors, and just good acquaintances. But despite this, the girl strived to study and was able to finish school with honors. She was lucky, and at the university where she wanted to enter, there was one more budget place. So Diana became a law student. 3 years had passed since then. her father began to complain more often about back pain, and she met Dustin. He was a student at the same university. He was known as a ladies' man, but he didn't want to learn. He was happy with the fact that he could come and sit in the classroom all day and then go to a party. Dustin was an excellent soccer player and captain of the varsity team. All the girls in the faculty paid attention to him, but he had chosen Diana, seducing her with bright emotions and searing advances. For the sake of this, Dustin did not even spare the money, which he generously gave his rich parents. At the same time, Diana, responding to his advances, constantly made remarks about the cost it pushes. Dustin reacted and replied, "When we start living together, then I will stop." It was a clear proposal of marriage. However, Dustin was in no hurry to do so, seeing Diana as just a woman. In other words, he liked to court her, receive affection, and be the center of her attention. Diana, too, at first, was happy to have such a handsome boyfriend. But at the same time, all her thoughts were about her father. He needed an emergency operation, and the local doctors did not dare to do it. They were afraid that if they removed the shard, Evan would be completely paralyzed, and then Diana would have to take care of him around the clock. He's immobile now too, but he's at least somewhat able to look after himself. To be honest, Evan was ashamed that his daughter had to look after him. He complained about it every time. "I've had it with you, Diane. I'm so sick to my stomach." "Come on, Daddy, do you really think I'm going to leave you?" Diana answered. "It would be better for me not to live at all in this world than to suffer and torture you," said her father with tears in his eyes. "Stop it, Dad. You're only making things worse for yourself." Her daughter tried to calm him down. "You'll see, I'll think of something, and you'll be able to walk again." "What can you do, Diana? You don't have a magic wand," Evan said, smiling with difficulty. "That's right, I don't have a wand, but I have a lot of will to cure you," Diana answered cheerfully and humorously. She was optimistic and didn't let her father get depressed. But let's face it, Diana could not but realize that to save her father needed money, and a considerable amount of money, so necessary to carry out a complex operation. But where to get it? Because she was studying at university, and her father's pension was barely enough for them. Diana thought about it every day. Gradually, acquaintance with Dustin grew into a serious relationship. He managed to charm Diane. True, with further steps did not hurry, postponing everything for later. At the same time, his parents are fed up with the fact that their son aimlessly burns through life, money, and does not strive for anything. They constantly hinted to him that it is time to get married. His mother, Anna, was especially successful in this. "Dustin, son, the future's not far off and you've got to make up your mind about life." "Mom, I'm not in a hurry. I have a girlfriend and it's enough for me," Dustin answered, but at the same time, did not say who his chosen one was. Okay, let's not rush, but you must introduce her to us," Anna jokingly threatened him with her finger. "You'll find out in time," Dustin replied evasively, putting it off for later. He liked doing things that didn't take responsibility. Yes, he enjoyed his relationship with Diana, but that was enough at this point. Dustin wasn't in a hurry to go any farther yet, but his parents were of a different opinion. Another 2 weeks passed and Dustin was still in no hurry to introduce Diana to his parents. He continued to see her, but he didn't share any news with his mother and father. Their curiosity got the better of them, and one day they couldn't take it anymore. "Son, enough secrecy. Bring the bride and we'll get acquainted," said his father strictly, Mickey. "Of course, why wait? We're already worried about you," supported his wife. "Well, why are you so restless?" Dustin was indignant. "Well, I'll bring Diana, all right." "So, her name is Diana?" Anna asked her son in surprise. "Yes, I didn't tell you." "Look at him, honey, he's laughing at us too," said the father indignantly. "Son, we don't know anything about your girlfriend." "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry, I forgot I didn't tell you anything," Dustin replied guiltily, making innocent eyes. "We'll come together this weekend and you can meet Diane." Anna and Mickey took it as a gift of fate. They were so happy that at last they would be able to give their son into good hands that they organized a feast for the occasion. Dustin's mother set a sumptuous table, and his father brought from the cellar Naloka 10 years old. At the appointed time, the son arrived with Diana. The girl was shy at first, but then realized that she was treated with kindness and relaxed. Mickey took advantage of this moment and took her aside for an important conversation. Diane was surprised at such secrecy, but decided to listen. Understand, Diane, we want our son to be happy, Dustin's father began, probing the ground. Well, of course, you're his parents, she replied calmly. It's good that you understand, Mickey continued. And I want you to keep seeing Dustin. It's just a relationship, but it can grow into a family. Diana realized what he was getting at and said clearly, time will tell, as long as your son grows up. Don't worry about that. His mom and I will prepare Dustin for real life. At dinner, Diane was no longer harassed with questions. She told them she lived with her disabled father. She'd also mentioned his problem and that his mom had died of cancer 3 years ago. She summarized her whole background. Dustin's parents' eyes glittered unnaturally as they listened to all this. And it wasn't even the liquor that could have affected such a state. No, it was just that Anna and Mickey realized that they were looking at the best candidate to marry their son. After all, she had nothing but a sick father, which meant that Diane would do whatever Dustin told her to do without complaint. In essence, they would control him themselves and create an obedient robot out of him. Anna saw her son as an extension of herself, but she wanted her to be in control. She did not exclude her husband from the process of management, but only as an assistant. Yes, he is an excellent surgeon, but no more than that, and he had his own role in their family. Having planned all the events for the year ahead, they could not have imagined that the son would spoil everything. He began to disappear more often, and then Diane had to call them to find out where Dustin was. One day it happened at 12 o'clock at night. Anna looked at her watch and nearly snapped at Diane. Well, what is it? Do you have a conscience? I have a conscience, but your son seems to have forgotten it, Diana said calmly. So what happened? Dason's not home again. Worse, Anna. The police called me and asked me to come and pick him up. I don't understand. What did he do? Anna asked me dryly. I don't really understand, but it seems that he got into a fight with his friends and broke a store window, answered Diana. I see, Anna said. Stay at home and don't go anywhere. I'll tell my husband and he'll come get Dustin. He's got connections there, and he'll give him an educational talk. Anna woke her husband, briefly summarized what had happened, and sent him to the police. 2 hours later, the son was home and listened to his mother's lectures. What are you doing? Making a fool of me and my father. Mom, don't talk nonsense. You had nothing to do with it, Dustin replied in a slurred voice. Yes, of course. We're not the ones who will blush for you in front of Diana. Anna almost cried. Well, I'm sorry. I won't do it again, like a little child persuaded her son. Go to bed, and in the morning go and apologize to Diana. Okay, you can talk a dead man into it, Dustin snarled and went into his room. Anna shook her head at him and shook her fist at her husband. It's all your fault. What did I do? Mickey asked in confusion. You spoiled him, you gave him money, even though I didn't approve of it, she replied, curling her fingers on her right hand. And you didn't educate him, so he grew up to be a major. Let's not insult him. The husband made a disgruntled face. I think everything will work out and Diana will forgive him. She's not a stupid girl, and she must realize that she couldn't find a better husband. Oh, Mickey, I wouldn't be so cathartic, the wife said with a heavy sigh. But we'll see what happens, and it turned out to be what they least expected. Dustin woke up and with a wrinkled face went to apologize to Diana, except he forgot to check his pants pockets. Apparently, he'd been so well rested the night before that he didn't remember anything. Passing by a flower store, it suddenly dawned on him that he needed to buy flowers. After paying the saleswoman, he took a bouquet of white roses from her. A shaky hope of forgiveness immediately appeared in his soul. Dustin rang the doorbell and held the bouquet of flowers out in front of him. Diane opened it a moment later and buried her face right in the roses. You came after all. As you can see, I repent and apologize, Dustin replied, breathing on her with a hangover breath. Come in. There's no need to make a spectacle of the neighbors. Diana softened and dragged him into the apartment. They lived in the center of the city, and Dustin's parents had rented it to them. They'd offered to live with them, but Diana had refused. She'd said at the time that there was no need to rush things. Dustin went into the kitchen, took a mug from the cupboard, and began to drink cold water from the tap. What are you doing? There's filtered water in the pitcher, Diane exclaimed. It's okay. It's fine. Dustin dismissed her. I have so many toxins in me that one more microbe in the water won't make a difference. Dustin drank enough and headed for the bathroom. I have to take a shower. I smell bad. Naturally, you've been in the monkey house, Diana laughed. But she didn't laugh when Dustin took off his clothes. A woman's panties fell out of his pants pocket. Not only that, but there was a paper note in them. Picking up all this goodness from the floor, Diana unfolded the leaflet and saw their numbers that looked like a phone number. What do you mean by that? I don't know. Someone must have been joking, Dustin said calmly and went into the bathroom. And you expect me to believe that? There's no other way, unless they're not yours, Dustin laughed. No, they're not mine, Diana said, embarrassed. Then I don't understand anything, and let me wash up. Dustin stubbornly did not want to tell me how he got another woman's underwear in his pocket. Okay, let's do this another way, Diane said. There's also a phone number call. Maybe it's the owner of the panties. Well, if you insist, Dustin muttered and picked up his cell phone. But before he could get an answer, Diane was on the other end of the line. A woman's voice came through on the other end of the line. Dustin, hi, did you forget about me? No. He was looking for you so he could give you your underwear, Diana replied stiffly. There was a beep. It sounded like the stranger got scared and turned off her phone. Meanwhile, Dustin had fallen asleep right in the bathroom and couldn't hear who Diana was talking to or what she was saying. Not long thinking, the girl brought him to his senses, patting his cheeks with her palms. We're breaking up, okay? Are you mad about the panties? Dustin mumbled. So I'll buy you some more, even better. Diana threw the underwear at him and started to pack. It took her 40 minutes to fill her bag with her things. She had a feeling she wouldn't be here for long. Dustin, on the other hand, continued to sit in the bathroom as if nothing had happened. It was as if he'd fallen out of reality and didn't realize what was happening. He only came to his senses when the door slammed behind Diana. It was as if he'd been sobered. Dustin jumped out of the bathroom and ran for the phone. The digits of the girl's number flashed through his mind. With trembling hands, he dialed them on his cell phone, but he heard a dial tone in response. That meant that Diana had blacklisted his number. Not knowing what to do next, his brain refusing to work properly after last night's fun, he started to get ready to go back to his parents. After all, only they could help him in this situation. Meanwhile, Diana was on her way to her father's house. She wanted to cry, but the tears did not come, as if she had long ago cried them. She didn't call him in advance, afraid that he would guess everything at once and start to worry. At home, she prepared her father for the unpleasant information and told him everything. Evan clenched his hands into fists and furrowed his brow. I knew that Dustin was a dark man, he said through gritted teeth. Dad, I didn't think he was capable of this, Diana said with tears in her eyes. You're the one who told me about Dustin's drinking. I'm a dad, I do, but it was just hanging out with friends, Diane said. That's where it all started. Her father wagged his finger at her. He felt he had impunity and decided to go all the way. What am I supposed to do now? Nothing. Let him worry himself, replied the father calmly. You'll see that within 2 days he'll come here and beg for forgiveness. He's already done that. He even gave me flowers, Diana said quietly. Well, now he'd have to lavish a gift to make it up to her. At home, Dustin received a reprimand from his parents that he never had to listen to in his life. Mom was the hardest on him. Son, you just killed me, Anna said with a shrug. It is necessary to forget in the pocket of another woman's panties. And judging by their size, the girl was shapely, said Mickey with humor. Honey, what are you talking about? Anna blushed. What's wrong? Everything is natural, reasonably answered her husband. I just noticed that our son knows how to choose his women. That's true, agreed with his wife. But that still didn't give him the right to behave that way. How could you, Dustin? It's an insult to her feelings. What are you gonna do? I thought you were going to advise me, Dustin said guiltily. You have to think about it. You can't just do it on the spot, Anna said, looking thoughtful. I know what to do. Mickey rubbed his hands together. So, son, buy her an expensive present and invite her back to our house. And if she doesn't accept, Dustin asked cautiously. Try your best. It's in your best interest, his father replied sternly. Dustin followed his instructions. He bought a gold bracelet in a jewelry store and hurried to Diana's house. But she wasn't there, and Evan refused to let him in. He spoke to him through the door. "Diana's in class, unlike you." "I just got a little sick and had to take a personal day," Dustin replied. "I know how sick you are. Don't embarrass yourself." Evan kept talking through the door. "What am I supposed to do?" Dustin begged. "I'm not the boss of you to tell you what to do. Diana's at the university, that's where you'll find her. But keep in mind, if you hurt her, I'll get you from under the ground." Dustin nodded, though Evan didn't see it, and went down the stairs. Once outside, he looked up at their windows and whispered with a chuckle, "He'll get me from under the ground, you old cripple." He waited for almost an hour and a half outside the university to avoid being caught by the professors. Diana appeared at the exit, accompanied by her classmates. Dustin had to hide so that his gossipy friends wouldn't see him. Finally, when they had dispersed and Diana was alone, he came up behind her and put his arm around her shoulders. "Again, I'm sorry. I don't know how it happened." "Well, of course you do," Diana replied without turning her face to him. "I called Edward and he told me they were playing a prank on me." Dustin began to justify himself. His sister answered the phone. "Let's say, but why didn't you call her back and find out?" Diana also asked without turning around. "You saw the state I was in." "Oh yes, it was hard to miss." Diana finally turned around. "You couldn't even stand on your feet." "Well, imagine me calling her," Dustin continued. "By the way, this is a gift from me as a token of my forgiveness. And let's go to my parents today, they're waiting." Diana accepted the gift from him and agreed to go. At the same time, she still didn't believe him. Dustin had apologized to her so many times lately for his actions that it was time to start a journal. But she wanted to look his parents in the eye. What would they say for themselves? They were probably covering for their son to get away with it. Arriving at Dustin's parents' home, Diane found herself in the arms of first Anna and then Mickey. They were so excited. They just couldn't hide their emotions. "We never thought you'd forgive him," Dustin's mom chirped. "Even I was skeptical, but now I see I was wrong," said Dustin's father. "I haven't forgiven him yet. It's just a truce," Diana said proudly. Everyone laughed, taking her words as a sign of forgiveness. It seemed to them that Diana wanted to show her character. Dustin sat her down in a chair and sat down on the divan himself. "You don't mind our son being so mean to you," Mickey continued. "He's just a fun-loving boy who likes to be in bad company. But I'm sure that as soon as Dustin settles down, he'll get his mind right." Once again, she was being blatantly hinted that it was time to get married, and not to someone, but to their son. It seemed they were trying their best to put Dustin in good hands. Apparently, his parents were fed up with him, so they were willing to make such a move. Diana guessed what the intellectuals were up to and decided she wouldn't disappoint them, especially since she still believed in Dustin's sincerity. After a small but dense lunch, Mickey took Diana aside again for a serious conversation. "Are you going to go back to praising your son?" she joked. "No, this time I won't. You know what I mean," he replied cautiously and uncertainly. "I can see how his behavior makes you sick, but it's imperative that we marry Dustin." "I realize that, but you have to realize that with his attitude, he's going to be hard for anyone to get along with," Diana countered. "That's why I wanted to make a deal with you," Mickey whispered. "Only no one has to know about it." "A deal? I'm offering to help you treat your father," he continued. "I have connections among surgeons in private hospitals. They'll take on this complicated operation. You realize that we can't drag this out any longer. It will only get worse." Diana felt a lump in her throat. She hadn't expected Dustin's parents to be capable of such a thing. "I need to think about it," she said and covered her face with her hands. "Well, you don't have to cry," Mickey tried to reassure her. "I just want you to marry Dustin." "And if I say no?" Diane asked quietly. "Then your father will suffer for the rest of his life," he said calmly. "And that splinter will take him to his grave someday. Besides, I'm going to ask the university chancellor to have you expelled. No doubt they'll find a reason and you'll be left without an education and without a happy future." Mickey's words sounded so serious that Diana couldn't help but believe them. She knew what kind of man he was and what he was capable of. She had to agree. "All right, I'll do as you asked, but Dustin can't know anything about this." "Of course I'm a grave. My son won't hear anything from me." Mickey ran his finger over his lips. At that moment, the man who had caused the conversation came up to them. "What are you two whispering about? I hope you're not discussing me." "You guessed it, son," his father laughed. "I was explaining to Diana what to do if she finds another woman's underwear in your pocket again." "What did you advise her to do?" Dustin asked apprehensively. "Nothing much," Dad said. "I told her to bury you in those panties." Diana hadn't expected such an impromptu suggestion and laughed out loud. Anna picked up the baton after her, but Dustin wasn't smiling. He must have taken his father's words seriously. His face contorted into an angry grimace. And even though no one paid attention, Dustin remembered the joke for a long time. At the same time, he had to continue playing the role of the guilty groom. Diana hadn't fully forgiven him yet and kept her distance for the time being. That day, she received an offer she couldn't refuse. But what price would she have to pay for it? She was terrified of a bleak future where, at best, she would be a servant to Dustin. Diana hated their son even more. She was so disgusted with the major that she could barely contain herself from saying everything she thought about him to his face. But there was no way out. It was her senior year, and if Mickey carried out his threat, she would be expelled. She couldn't let that happen. If her father found out, he wouldn't survive it. Diana thought about it and inwardly resented it, but there was nothing left for her to do but endure. From her parents, Dustin took Diana to their shared apartment. She pretended that everything was fine so as not to arouse his suspicions. At home, they cooked dinner together, and it seemed as if there was peace between them. But it was only an appearance, for sooner or later the irreparable would happen again. Dustin wouldn't wait long and would pull another prank. He had had enough for a few days, all the while studying diligently after returning to the university. But on the weekend, when his classmates decided to have fun at the club, he was drawn to adventure again. Diana didn't stop him, she just warned him. "If I find a woman's underwear again, I'll fulfill your father's promise." Dustin was startled because Diana's face was not playful at that moment. I get it. We'll just sit with the guys," he said. "Okay, I'll see you at 12 o'clock at the latest." Diana pointed at the wall clock. Dustin left, and she immediately dialed her father's number. "Dad, hi, how are you?" "I'm fine, daughter. Elizabeth is helping, and that's good," she answered. "What about you? Is everything okay?" "I think so," Diana answered uncertainly. "I don't know what's wrong with your voice." "I told you, I'm fine," she said more confidently. "It's just that Dustin and I had a little fight, and now we're making up. I'm getting married, by the way." "That's great news. Dustin proposed to you." "Of course he did, Dad. Of course he did," Diana lied. She couldn't tell her father that Dustin's parents had talked her into getting married. He wouldn't understand and would say she had no dignity. "I'm so glad, my daughter," Evan said in a cheerful voice. "You wouldn't believe what a celebration this is for me. If your mom were alive, she'd be happy too." "I don't doubt it," said Diana, crying. "Well, don't cry, daughter. Everything will be all right," her father soothed her. "You'll soon get married and you'll be the happiest person in the world." "Your words to God," said Diana. "Is there any doubt?" cautiously asked her father. "No, Dad, I'm just thinking," she replied. That was the end of their conversation. Diana couldn't lie to her father anymore. After all, this wedding was nothing but a farce that only Dustin's parents needed. For the sake of it, they were willing to compromise their own principles, to live only for love. And Diana was beginning to think that Anna and Mickey hadn't married for love either. Dustin's parents had suggested that they get married the week after the university graduation party. They were anxious to get their son married as soon as possible. He became even more, out of control. And if Diana was somehow used to it, it was already annoying them. At the same time, they couldn't openly tell Dustin what was on their minds. They loved him too much to upset him. As time went on, the prom was exactly 2 weeks away. Diane waited for Mickey to fulfill this promise, but he was in no hurry and remained stubbornly silent. She was tired of it, so she decided to remind him of it herself. "You haven't forgotten your part of the bargain." "Diane, my memory is fine," Dustin's father said evasively. "It's just that these things don't happen right away and there's no hurry when the wedding's right around the corner." "But you promised," Diana began, but Mickey interrupted her. "Don't worry, your father will be fine. If he's put up with this long, it's okay if he waits a little longer." "Well, understand, There's a waiting list at the clinic. I've made arrangements, but a couple of weeks of patience and it'll all be over." "What will be over?" Diana asked in confusion. "The end of your father's suffering, darling." Mickey smiled and patted her on the shoulder. After that conversation, Diane realized that until she married Dustin, no one would perform surgery on her father. She had to step on her pride again and continue to pretend that everything was fine. At the same time, such humiliation did not bode well. If Dustin's father was being evasive, something was amiss. Preparations for the wedding were well underway. Diana began to visit her father more often, even though Elizabeth was looking after him. She couldn't bear to see her being lied to. No wonder Mickey was deliberately dragging the rubber to make her nervous. Meanwhile, Dustin was preparing for a happy marriage through his parents' efforts. He wanted to continue to maintain the status that had developed between him and Diane. Anna and Mickey, however, were determined. "Son, come on. Family is much better," his mother urged him. "Can't we just leave it as it is?" Dustin looked at her like a little kitten. "No, because that's what my father and I decided," his mother said. "Isn't that right, Mickey?" "Yes, of course, dear," nodded the husband. "You see, son, Dad supports me too and wants you to be happy." "Well, if that's what you decide, that's fine," Dustin agreed. Happy that the problem with their son was solved, the parents hurried to order the most expensive restaurant for the wedding. They were going to celebrate the event with a big bang. Yes, so that everyone in town, envious and long, said, "Look at how generous these Walkers." Anna especially wanted that. She cared about her husband's reputation and could not help but realize that any event with his participation, it is advertising. As for Dustin, he only partially agreed to his parents' demands. He had no desire to give up his old lifestyle. All these parties and clubs and girls of easy behavior and beckoned the promiscuous and eager for debauchery young guy. He, by the way, was not shy to talk about it. True, for Diane every time invented stories, like the one about underpants and the sister of a classmate. At the same time, Diane suspected that Dustin was taking girls to their house. A neighbor once told her, "You know, Diane, he brings someone over when you're not home." "What do you mean?" "You know, girls, young and pretty," the neighbor whispered as if someone could hear her. "Are you sure about that?" Diana asked. "Here's a cross for you, Diana." The neighbor crossed herself. "I've seen Dustin bring girls over several times with my own eyes. And the interesting thing is, he was always drunk. Otherwise, he'd say hello, but he'd walk by like I was a ghost." "I see, thanks for the information." Diana thanked her neighbor. At that moment, she felt so nasty that she wanted to spill everything out. Diana felt nauseous, her insides were turning upside down, and her head was just buzzing. Dustin didn't care about morality at all, since he'd allowed himself to bring other girls into their home. And now the trick with the unexpected sister will definitely not work. Diana decided to take action and went to her father's house. There, in her little jewelry box, was the family ring. Mom had given it to her shortly before she died, and Diana had promised to keep it, no matter what life's difficulties. Now, however, the moment had come when a choice had to be made. Her father greeted his daughter with mild amazement. "Don't tell me you two are fighting again." "No, Dad, everything's fine," Diana replied calmly. "I'm going to have a sleepover tonight." "What about Dustin?" Dad asked. "I called him, he knows," she said. "Don't worry about him. Dustin's having a great time. He's having a good time." "Oh, so he's having a bachelor party." "Well, something like that," said Diana. "Then you should have a bachelorette party," Dad continued. "That'll come later," Diana said mysteriously. In the meantime, she had to get ready for the wedding. In her room, she checked her jewelry box and made sure the ring was still there. In the morning, Diana was going to do something that would help her expose Dustin. She took the ring to a pawn shop where she got good money for it. The appraiser, a gray-haired man, shook his head sympathetically and said through the glass, "It seems that you have really serious problems if you dare to do such a thing." "Yes, I am," Diana answered him. She said nothing more to him. With the proceeds, she bought a hidden camera. She decided to install it in the bedroom to record all of Dustin's adventures. But before she could do that, she had to find a professional to do it. Diana called the company through a newspaper ad. They promised to send an installer, and they didn't charge much for the service. As luck would have it, Dustin didn't show up at home that day. It looked like he was out with his friends again. The specialist arrived at her place 2 hours later and carefully installed the camera. Well, now it's gonna work like clockwork. Tell me, did I understand correctly that you can take pictures later? Diana asked. Of course, as you wish, the installer replied cheerfully. If you want, you can download them to an electronic medium. I see you've decided to set up your own detective agency. Something like that, Diana jokingly waved him away. And thank you for your speed. As she paid, Diana tuned in to find out who Dustin was taking to their house while she was away. She didn't bother telling his parents. They'd be sticking up for their son anyway. Besides, she'd made a deal with Mickey, and for her father's sake, Diane decided to go through with it. She still believed that a miracle would happen and her future father-in-law would keep his promise. The unsuspecting Dustin once again brought a girl to his house. It was afternoon, Diana was in class, and he decided not to bother with tedious lectures. Lately, Dustin had disbanded in general and was doing everything to make him even more hated. Maybe it was the wedding that had affected him. He just went along with his parents' demands. In fact, he didn't want to get married, he wanted his freedom. But he didn't realize that his mother and father were not going to fund his wild life without limits. They already risked their reputation when they constantly pulled his son out of various troubles. And he should have realized that it was time to stop and think about the future. But no, he'd rather continue to have fun, throwing his parents' help to the wind. That's what Dustin was, irresponsible and spineless. And even if he got married, it would still be up to his mom to decide for him. Anna wouldn't let her son set sail without personal supervision. Yes, she slept and dreamed about when he would finally get married, but in such a way that she would always be there for him. In this case, she and her husband even wanted to buy an apartment across the wall from the neighbors. And then Anna would come to them every day. At the same time, she did not know about her husband's true intentions. She didn't know that her husband was playing his own game. And not just making some plans, but keeping Diana on a short leash. It was possible that she would not have approved. At least, she wouldn't want to create a happy future for her son that way. All these games were being played past Dustin. He was getting ready for the wedding, but in a special way. It looked like his bachelor party had gone on too long and needed to come out of the steep dip. He showed up at the university that day, but Diana, on the other hand, excused herself. She went to their apartment to review the CCTV footage. But no sooner had she taken it down than the doorbell rang. Her heart pounded so hard it was ready to jump out of her chest. Putting the camera in her purse, she went to open the door. "Oh, hello, Catherine." The neighbor stood on the doorstep, and Diana made a face as if she had just woken up. "It's good that you're home and not in class," she said briskly and entered the apartment herself. "Something's wrong. Are you still asking?" Question for question, the roommate said. Dustin brought a girl again. Not just one girl, but several at once. What a womanizer. "He's got a nerve. He's going to get it from me," Diana said indignantly, but she didn't really care what Dustin was doing. "That's right, Diane. Shake him up," the neighbor said. "Or maybe I'll help. I have more strength." "No, don't, Catherine. I can do it myself," answered Diana calmly. "Well, okay, of course, it's up to you. But if anything, call me." The neighbor left the apartment, and Diana was finally able to exhale. She had been so scared when the doorbell rang that she was ready to fall through the ground. If it was Dustin, he'd start asking questions and he'd suspect something was wrong. The camera was in her purse, and all she had to do was dump what she'd recorded. Diana didn't do that at the apartment and went back to her father's, who still had her old computer. All the way there, all she could think about was what was inside. Would she really have to watch Dustin's most shameless adventures? Wondering about it, Diana almost missed the call from Anna. "Hi, honey. Have you done all the wedding preparations?" "Yeah, almost. I have a beauty salon and hair appointment at the end of the week, and then a dress fitting." "Well, look, we've already booked and paid for the restaurant," Anna continued. "I hope everything will be fine and we won't have to blush." "No, everything will be at its best," Diana answered with joy in her voice. Anna disconnected the phone, and the girl thought about the fact that all this would be over soon. This week, besides getting her hair done and trying on dresses, it was graduation. Not only that, but Dustin had volunteered to help her pick out the dress himself. He decided that his bride should look like a doll, and he'd ruled out a simple outfit. But what the dress would be was still a secret to Diana. At home, she downloaded all the footage from the camera onto her computer. And what she saw shocked her. Dustin and his girls were completely naked. They were walking around the apartment like that, uninhibited. Although, what could they be afraid of if everything was happening in her absence? Besides, Dustin was using their bed, not the divan in the living room. All in all, he was having fun without principle. Diane watched the footage and cried, tears rolling down her cheeks and dripping onto the table. Turning on some music on the computer, she decided to distract herself a little, but suddenly her father came into the room. "Daughter, you don't come out, you don't talk to me." "Dad, I'm sorry, I'm just tired," Diane replied sluggishly. "Good, then I won't bother you." The father closed the door and rolled on the wheelchair to watch TV. He knew that it was better not to disturb his daughter at such moments when she was alone. Diana would come out when she came to her senses and wanted to talk about something. This time, however, his daughter did not confront him. She took some things and left early in the morning. The girl hurried to an acquaintance who worked in a photo studio. With his help, Diana wanted to take some photos from the video shoot. Frank, seeing her in the doorway of his atelier, said cheerfully, "It's been a long time. Let me at least give you a hug." Diana responded in kind. "And you haven't changed. You're still the same searing brunette. Only you've never noticed," Frank muttered playfully. "Come on, you've got so many groupies. I can't compete with them," Diane said. "That's true, but you're still the best," Frank said. "So what brings you to me?" "Here," she handed him an electronic media. "I need to take some pictures." "Okay, let's see," Frank replied and took the small black box from her hands. A few minutes later, a video appeared on the monitor screen. Frank watched it carefully and only had time to round his eyes. And when it was over, he asked cautiously, "It's none of my business who's on the tape, but why do you need it?" "I want to keep it as a souvenir," Diana joked cheerfully. "So will you take the pictures, or should I look for another specialist?" "Yes, of course. Just show me what you want in the pictures," Frank nodded. Diane picked out some great angles that she thought were good. They were enough to get a good look at what Dustin was doing. Though, to be honest, it was clear he hadn't invited all those girls over for tea. Diane needed this whole camera thing to get back at him. She guessed that Mickey had no intention of helping her father. He was just pretending to care. Anna wasn't on her best behavior either. She didn't know what kind of fruit her son was. She could have gotten him to calm down, but no. She just gave him more slack, and he took advantage because he didn't see any obstacles. Guesses about the futility of treatment of his father was confirmed on the eve of the wedding. Diane overheard Mickey and his wife talking while they were visiting. "Are you out of your mind? What if she finds out?" Anna whispered to her husband. "Yeah, no, I'm sure Diane's just dreaming about her father's operation," Mickey bragged. "I don't know, it's all a bit shaky," Anna continued. "Stop panicking. The wedding will be over, and then I'll tell her everything," said her husband. "Okay, do as you wish, but don't let me down," Anna summarized. Diana almost burst into tears when she heard that, but she had the stamina to hide her emotions deep inside. After this, she had no doubt that her father would not be treated, and in fact, it was possible to refuse the wedding. After all, no one was forcibly pulling her, but no, Diana decided to go all the way and take revenge. True, her father would not approve of this. He did not like to retaliate negatively, even if he was offended. Evan taught his daughter to draw the right conclusions. "Remember, Diana, a man can say bad words to you as much as he wants, but you must keep your composure. The truth is the most powerful weapon you have in your hands. You will be able to use it at any moment when the enemy does not expect it." Diane did just that. She purposely reproduced the photos from the videotaping to give her a surprise. Dustin and his family actually humiliated her dignity. Not only that, they tried to convince her that their son was the best family man in the world, and that Diane would follow him around like a stone wall. She hadn't heard such lies in a long time, unless you count her school years. In those days, many students lied to hide their problems and said whatever popped into their heads. But she's not like that and will use the truth to her advantage. The time of preparation for the wedding came to an end, and the day came when it was necessary to say the main words to each other. Almost all the guests who, in one way or another, knew the Walker family gathered. Her father had arrived with Diana, or rather, He had been brought by cab. Evan did not hide his joy because he was marrying off his beautiful daughter. I just want you to be happy. Thank you, Daddy. I'm glad to hear that, Diana answered while she looked at the hall. She wanted to make sure all the guests had arrived. The waiters were waiting for the command to bring out the gifts. Live music was playing everywhere, and everyone was in a good mood. Dustin walked over to Diana every now and then to see if everything was okay. He was so nervous that even an aperitif didn't calm him down. His parents, meanwhile, were quite comfortable welcoming the newly arrived guests. After an hour and a half, the hall was filled with people, and here Diana decided to make a speech. I want to thank Anna and Mickey from the bottom of my heart for such a gorgeous wedding. Everyone looked at them and clapped their hands. And I can't help but thank them for Dustin. Diane's voice was shaking, but she continued, because he is truly a worthy man in every woman's eyes. The guests looked at Diana for a moment surprised. The girl called for the waiters and said, now they would bring the surprise I had been preparing for so long. There were cheers of joy in the hall. As it turned out, the guests loved surprises, especially if they were free. After a few minutes, the waiters brought out envelopes for everyone. Take one each, Diana commanded. The guests took the envelopes from the waiters' hands and waited to see what would happen next. Surprisingly, it was Dustin and his parents who didn't get any. Outraged by this injustice, they shouted in one voice, what about us, Diana? Did you forget about us? We want surprises too. Give us those envelopes too. No, my dears, you are more important to me than anyone else in the world, she said ironically. After all, it is a surprise for you, but it is necessary for everyone to see it. The guests started opening the envelopes and pulling out pictures, the very ones she had reproduced from the video shoot. Evan was curious as to what was in those pictures, so he rode his wheelchair up to one of the guests. Excuse me, I'm Diane's father. I didn't get an envelope either. Yes, please join us, the guest replied, and he rounded his eyes when he saw what was captured on them. The photos were full of shots of the son of a famous surgeon in the city having fun with naked girls. Not only that, he himself was without clothes, brazenly defiling in front of his mistresses. The guests looked at these pictures and clucked their tongues. Finally, Mickey had had enough of this, and he approached Evan. Would you mind? I'd love to. Diane's father called him by his middle name. Just the best surprise for you and your family. Just don't go blind, or your wife will get jealous. When she heard that they were talking about her, Anna rose abruptly from her chair and, taking Dustin by the arm, approached her husband. Let's see what's in the pictures. Evan handed them several pictures. They nearly collapsed on the floor when they saw their son with his mistresses. Naturally, there was a hiccup. Dustin, son, what is this? Why are you in pictures with naked girls? Laughing across the room, their son abruptly blurted out, I'm not bad, and most importantly, there's something to look at. Thank you, Diane, for the publicity. Unable to tolerate his attitude, she threw her wedding ring on the table. Have fun, it's your favorite thing to do. The guests murmured, discussing aloud the family of the famous surgeon. Meanwhile, Anna and Mickey were ready to fall to the ground in shame. They had no idea what kind of surprise the bride would give them. But it was their fault. They should never have promised something they didn't intend to fulfill. And that was especially true of Dustin's father, who had deceived her. Before leaving the restaurant, Diane addressed the guests again. Now you see who you've come to congratulate, she cried, not even trying to wipe away her tears. Her father rode up to her in a wheelchair. Daughter, don't. Let's get out of here. No, Daddy, I'll make a deal. Let everyone know what kind of people they are, Diana continued. You won't believe this, but Mickey tricked me into marrying his son. That's an outright lie. Don't believe a word of it, the surgeon shouted, waving his arms vigorously. Calm down, Mickey, you'll have a chance to speak, someone answered him from the audience. The surgeon was immediately silent, looking at the guests with funny eyes. So, Diana took the floor again. He promised to organize a complicated operation for my father. He is a former paratrooper, received a shrapnel wound in the back during a combat mission. Well, how could I do otherwise? Diana looked at the guests with tearful eyes, and they, in turn, at the surgeon's family. They all had a disgruntled look, as if they had come not to a wedding, but to a ruined performance. Dustin was the only one who didn't react. It seemed to him that it was all a game and soon it would be over. Anna stepped forward and tried to justify her son. It must have been a bachelor party. I don't see anything wrong with it. Of course it was, because Dustin is a saint to you, Diana replied and stormed out of the room. The guests looked at each other and grumbled unhappily. Oh, Mickey, you've ruined your reputation. Indeed, the surgeon was no longer in the mood for fun. He realized that the news of the wedding would soon spread throughout the city, and only a lazy man would not point a finger at him. He looked threateningly at his son and said angrily, "You couldn't wait till the wedding. You broke the combination." "Come on, Mickey, we have nothing more to do here." His wife took him by the hand and led him to the exit. "Mom, Dad, what about me?" "You're your own man now," his mother told him. "You're on your own. We won't help you anymore. By the way, I'll block all the cards today, so you won't have fun with our money." The parents also left, leaving the son alone with his thoughts. He had a lot to think about. After all, the unknown was ahead of him, in which he would have to survive somehow. Meanwhile, when Diana ran outside, a man in his 30s approached her after a couple of minutes. "I'm sorry to intrude, but I can help your father." "What are you, a wizard?" Diana asked absent-mindedly, not believing his words. "No, I'm a surgeon and I have my own clinic," the stranger replied. "My name is Tom, by the way. You can just call me by my first name." "Thank you, but we still don't have that much money for the operation. You're not a philanthropist and you need to earn money too." "You don't have to pay anything. We'll operate on your father for free," Tom reassured her, gently running his hand over her shoulder. "I don't know what to tell you," Diana said uncertainly. "Let's go to the clinic right now," Tom suggested. Diana wanted to run after her father, thinking that he was still in the restaurant, but Evan suddenly approached her. "I heard that, daughter. It's up to you whether you agree or not." "Dad, this is our only chance and we have to take it," Diana replied. Together they went to Tom's clinic. There he ordered to prepare the best room for Evan. While he was being prepared for surgery, Diana had time to get acquainted with an interesting and handsome surgeon. It turned out that he also experienced betrayal. His wife cheated on him with his best friend. As a result, they divorced and Tom literally from scratch, rebuilding the clinic. His ex-wife almost bankrupted her, taking the money and some of the equipment. In a short time, he was able to start the clinic, keeping the same staff. And now, under his direction, these medics were preparing Evan for surgery. Everything was successful and the splinter, which had tormented him for so long, was carefully removed. Full mobility has not yet returned to him. But now the paratrooper could at least move on crutches, completely refusing a wheelchair and outside help. Diane grew to trust Tom, and they began to meet. She finally found her happiness as a reward for all the torture and humiliation. As for Mickey, the incident caused him problems at work. He was trusted less and less often with complex operations, and he could no longer earn a normal income. His son began to drink because he was cut off from the money trial, and he could do nothing. He found himself a strange company and spent the whole day playing peers with them in the yards. The acquaintances often saw Dustin drunk, when he was either sitting on a bench or lying under it. And none of them tried to save him. They didn't care. And just like that, one day, he ruined his life, turned into an alcoholic and was not going to get out of it. He never got married because no normal woman would ever look in his direction again. Diana soon married Tom, and after a while she informed him that she was pregnant. "Diana, would you be so kind as to hand me the morning paper?" Archie turned to his wife, Diana, sitting in a large, deep armchair next to the fireplace. The man was well into his 50s, but he still looked good and tried to keep as mobile as possible, which however did not prevent him from occasionally asking small but nice favors of his wife. Diana was 10 years younger than her husband, but kept a sharp mind and in every way to maintain its lustrous appearance good. The means for this the couple had. "Of course, darling," Diana murmured, and then rose gracefully from the long dining table where she preferred to drink coffee and handed her husband the morning paper, shining her new manicure in front of him. "Thank you, darling," Archie replied, smiling dazzlingly. From the outside, it might seem that the Stones were the sort of people who tended to live a somewhat pretentious and ostentatious life, but that wasn't really the case. The couple really owned a solid business company engaged in the manufacture of individual furniture to order, but conducted their business honestly from start to finish. taking care that the client was satisfied and received their project in detail, in the beautiful execution of cabinetry and on time. Business for them was not a simple set of numbers or a method of quick enrichment furniture. In the understanding of the stones equated to a real work of art and served not only exclusively practical purposes, but also aesthetic, creating in the house of the unique atmosphere that could as if personify its entire design with the owners themselves, revealing through the furnishings of the house of their character. Although their fortune could not compare with the multi-million-dollar earnings of people from the top lines of ratings of the magazine Forbes, all the same, the case gave a fairly stable income, thanks to which in this stones were absolutely uelisini. Their family will live in wealth and material well-being for many years. The couple had met over 30 years ago when they were both still at university. And since then, the young people have never parted for a minute. After living so many years soul to soul, the couple stone learned one simple truth, which in their opinion, and allowed this union to last so long. When the passions and first love fades to replace them in the family comes mutual respect and a true, deep understanding of the characters and needs of his partner. Archie and Diana, over the years, had had time to study and accept each other as they are. This, in turn, allowed the couple to avoid not only global quarrels, but also minor misunderstandings that can poison life no less than the most audacious of treason. Suspicion, lies, subterfuge about this couple Stone never heard, and even, what a sin, proud of their exemplary marriage. But even more than an ideal union and clearly Viola Cinema, favorite business Stone family, was proud of their own son John. When the child was born, Archie and Diane thought they were the happiest people on the planet. Since John's childhood, he was given a huge amount of attention from his parents. Despite the fact that the couple worked almost around the clock to develop their business, they managed to somehow do without nannies and hired tutors, completely independently engaged in the upbringing and health of their son. Diana never neglected her maternal duties, always finding the opportunity to carve out a little time to study with John or read him a bedtime story. Archie, too, could calmly explain to his associates in the middle of a business meeting that he needed to step away for a moment to call home and check on the baby. The man always put his family first, so at weekends he tried to spend as much time as possible with his wife and son, playing with the latter and spending pleasant hours with Diana, who at such times always tried to push the conversation away. Always tried to put their work together on the back burner. The couple worked in the same company, but headed different departments, so sometimes they did not cross paths in their office for weeks. The years passed quickly, and then Stefan turned from a small, modest boy into a tall, broad-shouldered, handsome man with a lustrous mop of light blonde hair, a charming smile, and always cheerful, light brown eyes. John took the best of both parents, his father's pleasant, masculine appearance with his athletic build, and his mother's razor-sharp, analytical mind. Diana could not be pleased, watching how cleverly her son solves first crossword puzzles in children's magazines, and then in adult newspapers, and even in collections of the best crossword puzzles in the world, and later on, complex algebra equations, which he cracked like peanuts. It is not surprising that with such phenomenal abilities, Stefan decided to enroll not anywhere, but in the mathematics department. The boy dreamed that with the help of high-precision measurements, he would be able, in the future, to develop entire algorithms for automated control of complex industrial machinery. Actually, on all of the above features, the similarity of Stefan with his parents ended. Contrary to the widespread opinion that in such families the apple does not fall far from the apple, in the Stone family was the exact opposite. Sometimes Archie imagined that their son, at a very early age, accidentally replaced in the maternity hospital, so different from the character of his own parents. And the older the son became, the more vividly these differences became apparent. In this case, it was not about bad habits. Rather, it was a matter of John's special perception of the world around him and his position in it. So, for every opinion of Stone Sr. and his wife, the son had his own often completely opposite point of view. This was especially true of the way Stefan's parents conducted business and about the direct participation of the heir himself in the affairs of the family business. In short, Stefan, as smart as he was, didn't want to be part of his parents' company. The boy dreamed of supercomputers and calculating linear algorithms. but not of someday heading a company of cabinet makers and taking his father's place in the director's chair. Because of this, the happy family often had conflicts, in the course of which Zavyalov Jr. always zealously defended his point of view and was ready to go in this matter literally straight through. Son, you understand. We can't do this without you. In this business without you, Archie tried to tell Stephen. This business, it was built by me and your mother for years. Decades, you might say. Naturally, I can't put some left-handed person in the director's seat, and I never wanted to. You and only you should take over the reins, son, you understand. Besides, who told you you can't run a company with your digital hobby? Check contracts, keep track of materials, control everything, and in your spare time you can do whatever you want. Honestly, I don't see what the problem is here. Stefan's hazel eyes darkened momentarily, not boding well for his parents. A problem? Really, what could be the problem here, Dad? The young man asked sarcastically. By day, you assemble tables and chairs for Perlis-Lissalnimi clients, and at night you design rockets. Is that it? Father, don't you think it's physically impossible to combine such things? John, you're dramatizing this again. Diane interjected. That's not what Dad is saying. He's trying to say that no matter how big your hobby is, and no matter how important it may seem to you today, it could change tomorrow, and you should be prepared that your great math knowledge and analytical skills will never go to waste because you have a family business to support and develop, and that your father and I will be happy to put in your hands and no one else's. Mom! Her daughter's scream was still in her ears, tearing her eardrums. Mommy! The woman's head darted across the pillow to the right, to the left, as if the woman would. So tell me, dear parents, that you have already planned my whole life by minutes. How I will live, where to work. Maybe you also picked up a bribe for me in advance? Looking at his mother unhappily, the boy folded his arms on his chest. His father loudly slammed his palm on the table. Stop talking to your mother like that. I don't understand. Where did you get that stubborn spirit from? We had a normal life. So what happened? What happened, Father, is that I've grown up. I am now. I'm a grown man, damn it, and I have the right to decide for myself how I want to live my life and what I want to do. And yes, I do intend to get married. Just so you know, I'm not going to change my mind. Diana clutched her heart and slowly settled into the chair. Mary, she asked weakly, holding the lapel of her tweed jacket. How? But when? To whom? It seemed to the woman that the house suddenly ran out of oxygen, and she couldn't breathe. Diana, my dear, Archie cried out, running up to his wife. What can I get you, please? Water? Valerian? Whoa, Valerie, water and valerian. Finally, the wife was able to breathe out. The father of the family immediately rushed to the kitchen, on the way angrily grabbed his son by the sleeve. Look what you've brought your mother to. Are you out of your mind? Who would say such a thing? Who would say such things like that? You should have told us on our wedding day. Go and apologize to your mother immediately. What kind of a revolutionary? Archie went to the kitchen to get the medicine. Stefan squatted down in front of his mother and took her hand. His indignation was replaced by concern for Diana's well-being. Mom, okay. I'm sorry I blurted it out so hastily. I just haven't had a chance to tell you about it yet. You've been going on and on about this internship. Head office. You have to do an internship in our head office. So I had given up hope that you would give me something to decide for myself in this life. And Alice. She's wonderful, you'll see. Alice? Still in the same weak voice, the mother asked. What Alice? The one from Blossom's family of diplomats? A faint hope slipped into the woman's words, but Stefan only shook his head. No, Mom. Alice Walker. She's from my class, remember? The dark one. Diana's hopes were dashed. Yeah, she remembered who? This Alice Walker. What was that? Alice who came from a family of farmers? From the village? Oh. The young man's mother clutched at her heart again. At that time, her husband arrived with a glass of water in one hand and a bottle of valerian in the other. Here, my love. Come on, I have exactly 12 drops, as the doctor prescribed. The man gave the woman the life-saving medicine, gently holding her back. Diana took a sip and nodded her head toward her son, addressing her husband. All right, Archie. It's about time. Our son decided to marry a provincial. Everything, studies, plans. It's all gone. He and his young wife are going to build rockets right in the middle of the field. Why? It'll be an interesting collaboration, promising. Stefan jumped to his feet, scaring his mother once again. Here we go. That's what I was talking about. You don't let me breathe without analyzing my every move. Your mom should have worked in the civil service in the organs. You'd have all the criminals confess their deeds at once. You wouldn't even have to torture them. Your sarcasm would have done it all for you. Ah, well, stop the bickering, shouted at his son Zavyalov Sr. Immediately calmed down and explained clearly. What's going on here? What provincial girl? What fields with missiles? Stefan, breathing more air into his chest, ruffled his wheat hair with his fist and began a detailed story. It turned out that their son had actually met Alice at university. They were both in their final year, but in different groups. As it turned out, the young man has long been looking at a pretty dark-haired girl with incredibly deep blue eyes, but couldn't quite make the first move. The fact was that Alice Walker always behaved very modestly, and against the background of her other classmates seemed too withdrawn. The girl did not attend general parties, did not go to clubs with the group, and did not tolerate alcohol. Instead, Alice preferred to spend all her free time or in the laboratory, where she tested different formulas and variants of algorithms from her last term paper, or in the library, where she constantly found new books on the subject of her diploma. The student did not hide her scientific ambitions. She very much wanted to win the final competition of student works, the main prize of which would be a study in a master's program on a completely free basis. A budget place at the school where Alice and Stefan were studying was almost always a rarity, and there was no need to talk about a master's program. Many students even took out a special loan to get the opportunity to study in their desired profile. That's why winning the competition, like anything else, interested Alice, and she did not intend to be distracted and spend her precious time on anything else but endless study and practice. With John Stone, the girl was brought together by pure chance. One day, Alice stayed in the laboratory, rooting over the next experiment, and accidentally forgot to turn off one clever apparatus, which helped in her work. Outside the window that evening, a thunderstorm was gathering long and hard, and at the moment when the girl was about to leave the study room, there was a sudden flash of lightning in the sky. The electrical charge instantly hit the lightning rod on the roof of the classroom building where the girl was studying at the time. Apparently, the lab's wiring failed, because the next second there was a menacing hissing sound, and the device exploded with a shower of blinding sparks. Alice cried out in surprise and fear, and immediately rushed into the corridor to look for help. At any moment, the fire in the lab was in danger of spreading outside the classroom. And that's when Alice bumped into Stefan, who was returning from his last class, thinking on the way about the topic of his future paper at the fall conference. The student literally stamped into the guy so that he just miraculously stayed on his feet. Walker. From surprise, Stefan didn't immediately realize that she might not even know that they were in the same department. What are you doing here? What's wrong? Alice's blue eyes widened involuntarily. How do you know my name? There's a fire. The lab's on fire. Just then, the tiny scent of smoke and burning plastic reached Stefan's sense of smell. On the opposite wall of the corridor began to dance fire glare, and only at this moment, the air around the young people literally shook with the sound of a fire siren. Were you there alone? There was no one else. Trying to shout the shrill sound, asked the girl Stefan. She shook her head negatively. The loud sounds frightened Alice, making her, against her will, cling harder to her companion. Stefan put one arm around the girl, and then they hurried out of the corridor. The firemen arrived 10 minutes later, by which time the lab room had almost completely burned out. After the fire was completely extinguished, the police also arrived on the scene, who, having drawn up a protocol, demanded explanations from Alice. The girl did not hide the fact that the fire started in front of her, and now tried to explain to the police and the rector how exactly it happened. The rector was, to put it mildly, not happy about what had happened. He was now only interested in who would cover the cost of repairing the lab and the equipment inside. Alice, do you have any idea how much all this stuff cost? Just a rough estimate, huh? There was equipment, the price of which was tens of thousands of dollars. Who will buy us a new one now? Maybe you, or maybe your farming parents. The girl sank down and stood in front of the rector with her head down. She was well aware that the sum he had mentioned was extremely large. Stephen, who knew that the girl's parents were modest and couldn't afford to cover even a tenth of the expenses, boldly stepped forward. "Come on, I'll help fix it. I can give the money in installments as the rebuilding progresses." The rector opened his mouth to object, but at that moment the fire chief approached them. The fire brigade chief, who had arrived to investigate the incident, approached them. "You're counting students' money for nothing, Alexander," he began after greeting them. "The case is an insurance case. The wiring should have been changed a long time ago. The fire would have occurred under any scenario, even if the girl had turned off the appliance. The mains just couldn't cope with the tenfold increase in load." Alexander squinted unpleasantly, but had to agree with the fireman's arguments. "The wiring in this building has not been changed for many years." Stephen and Alice finally let go. The rector limited himself to a strict reprimand to the students, and the next day, the administration of the institution held a large extraordinary meeting at which they were detailed briefing on fire safety. Alice was impressed by the way Stephen stood up for her in front of the rector, and from that moment on, the two young people struck up a pleasant acquaintance, which soon developed into a friendship. They were both very passionate about science. And then something more. The affair lasted about 6 months before Stephen finally decided to propose to Alice. And now, embarrassed and stammering in the most emotional places, he was telling his parents, "So what's that supposed to mean? You've been dating for 6 months, and you for all this time, not even a single word, not a single hint did not mention that you have a girlfriend." Diana lamented, "Son, well, you just like a knife in my heart stabbed to my family, the most dear people. And you didn't say anything." "Yes, Stephen, it's not good," Archie muttered after his mother. "I don't argue, you probably have a good girl. But why get married in the first place? We could have gone out for a year or two, met. A lot of couples do that nowadays. Test their feelings, see how they feel." Stephen once again apologized to his mother and father, but now he looked more concerned, rather than guilty about his secret. "What's there to check, Dad? You and Mom, when you started dating. Did you spend 2 years feeling the same way?" Zabielov Sr. only remained silent. "Same here. Anyway, what I wanted to say is, Mom, Dad, you're invited to dinner by Alice's parents. They want to get acquainted, because they're in-laws after all, and you'll get to meet Alice. You'll like her a lot, I promise." Diana looked anxiously at her husband. He also looked at her confusedly. Now they have to act as matchmakers. It's a good thing. "Give me some more valerian, Archie," she asked in a colorless voice, and then leaned back in her chair. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The dinner at the bride's parents' house was scheduled for 2 days later. On Sunday evening, the two families would meet at Alice's house to get acquainted and discuss the details of the wedding. "No, Archie. I'm not going to live through this, Archie," Diana complained. "I'd only seen a glimpse of Alice, of course. At the general meeting of the university community, she was a pretty little thing. But mark my word, we'll cry with her and her parents. Provincials, what are they like? All they care about, to get a bigger piece of the action here in the capital. Stefan says she's an excellent student. She's dreaming of a master's degree science. Maybe so, I don't doubt it. But that's the only reason why she's dreaming, because she wants to get a foothold. Yes, and 1 ours. She only needs our one as an anchor. If she's so smart, she must have some kind of plan. And her parents. Diana, why are you so categorical in your opinion about Alice?" Tried to soften the heated atmosphere of the father of the family. "Do you think our son is so stupid that he will allow himself to be fooled at the last major?" The couple were in their bedroom getting ready for bed. Archie was checking the economic news on his laptop, as he always did, and Diana was sitting in front of the mirror, applying a refreshing facial moisturizer to her face. All she could think about was how cleverly the faceless Alice Walker was ready to ensnare their son. "My dear, our son is first and foremost. Is a man, and that's a fait accompli. I'm sorry. Think back to when you were his age. How much thought did you give to chasing after a pretty girl? Archie closed the lid of his laptop, looking skeptically at his wife over his reading glasses. I didn't have time for, as you put it, pretty girls, he said in a low voice. I was working in a furniture factory while I was at university. Where you and I met, by the way. So the only girl in my life has always been and still is you, my dear. Diana turned around, slyly looking at her husband. Oh, flatterer, what a flatterer. Always find what word to say to a woman to make her melt. But let's get back to our sheep. That is, to Alice. The husband rolled his eyes quietly without his wife seeing. He realized that his son had not chosen the most enviable bride. But it was still his choice. There was nothing he could do about it. Her parents are probably some drunkards from the village. I know what I'm talking about. Guy, how many of them I've seen on business trips. One thing about farmers. They cover themselves with a nice foreign name, but they still drink. And still drink. And the only farming they have. Only potatoes and zucchini, the woman concluded, smearing cream on her hands. So now we have to be related to these Alkanauts? No way. Their daughter is a piranha, of course. But I'm a shark, you know. I'm a bigger shark than most. The businessman just sighed. What do you suggest? I mean, we can't just ignore their invitation. And ignore their invitation. And if they then, God forbid, in the press about this denounce? What will people say about us? Diana moved to the bed, closer to her husband, and definitely closed the lid of his portable computer. And about this, my dear, you and I are going to think now, she murmured. You understand, this wedding cannot be allowed. We are Stones, not the last people in town, and with the hillbillies we in Messalliance with categorically contraindicated. Therefore, we must come up with something, so that these provincials will run away from us like fire. Then it should be something, well, very unusual, suggested the businessman. They should be so hooked that they then went in shock for a week. Diana suddenly squinted. She clearly had some interesting idea, which she hurried to share with her husband. Why? It's an idea. You can beat the wedge out of the wedge, as they say. Jacob and the Walkers were preparing a big dinner party for their matchmakers, whom they would finally meet this Sunday. It was going to be a big dinner party, and it was important to make a good impression on their future in-laws. So they had the help of their daughter Alice and their future son-in-law Stephen. Sergio, do you think I should order duck from Paramount from the market, or should I get it at the supermarket? Meat can dry out in the oven. If the quality is not good, Alice's mother was worried. She wanted to impress the rich matchmakers. Stephen didn't hide the fact that his parents were well-to-do from the bride and her parents. Jacob, meanwhile, was making his own wine list, looking at the specialty stores on a large website devoted to the local wine industry. He wanted to buy a couple bottles of red for dinner, but he couldn't decide on the best value for money. Of course, you can get it at the market, Elizabeth, her husband said without hesitation. Have you ordered a bird for Paramount? The wife groaned and rushed to call the merchant, while Alice and Stephen, who were sitting in the kitchen, continued to make a menu of appetizers and salads. The dinner had to be perfect, and the couple decided to achieve this at any cost, even if they had to go broke on a couple of avocados and a whole pineapple. Alice's parents were indeed visiting farmers from the province. Walker's family, after a long life in the village, was able to save a small amount of money to settle in the city and finally relax. They were able to afford to buy a small house on the outskirts of the city, with an adjacent plot of land on a couple of acres, where Elizabeth built a small vegetable garden for herself and her daughter, and Jacob was able to put the long-awaited barbecue, on which he planned to cook kebabs all year round. Previously, he simply did not have enough time for this. When asked why they decided to move to the capital now, the Walker couple always replied that they had already lived in the village long enough, tired, they said, because their age is not young. Jacob was already well over 60, while his wife had just recently celebrated her 50th birthday. Alice was a late child. Perhaps that was why she wanted to get as much out of higher education as possible. She realized that it was her turn to take care of her parents, and that would require a lot of money, which she could get only by showing great success in her studies and later, in a high-paying job related to advanced technology. Otherwise, the Walker family was very discreet, even a little secretive. They didn't talk much about how they had become farmers. Stephen only knew that they worked very hard on the land and had their own cattle, which, due to their age, were becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. After their daughter graduated from high school, the family decided to sell off what was left of the farm and use the proceeds to move to the city. Here, they had only recently felt like real townspeople, slowly adapting and getting used to the accelerated pace of life in the capital. Sunday morning came. Stephen came to Alice's house in advance to help her and her parents set the table and prepare some dishes for serving. When everything was ready, the young couple couldn't help but notice that the table looked perfect. In the middle stood a huge dish with cut, beautiful slices of fruit, the crown of which was a huge golden pineapple, towering like a flagpole above all the other dishes. 3 kinds of salads, beautifully arranged in layers in porcelain salad bowls with an elegant oriental pattern, were given to the upcoming guests to choose from. Besides, on the table there were several smaller plates with appetizers and 3 bottles of fine red and white wine, personally chosen by the owner of the house for the arrival of future relatives. The finale of this belly feast was to be the Peking duck, which was languishing in the oven at that moment, and a large caramel chocolate cake, carefully chilled in the refrigerator, as it was made by Elizabeth herself according to a special family recipe. The meeting was set for 6 in the evening. I had to hand it to Alice's parents. Jacob wore his best suit, complete with new leather boots, and his wife wore a very stylish dress, reminiscent of the 50s, but more modern and austere. In a word, to the meeting of matchmakers, the Walkers were ready in all arms. However, unlike the parents of the bride, the Stones made completely different plans, the main of which was to prevent a possible mésalliance by any means at their disposal. That evening, the couple have long discussed various options for how they will forever turn their Stephen from this careless family Walker, led by their predator, daughter. In the end, in their heads they matured a plan, the originality of which could envy the Trojan horse of the ancient Greeks, wishing to finally divorce son with the bride, who, in their understanding, belonged to a much less prestigious social stratum. Spouses decided to come to the meeting in the oldest, well-worn rags, which, and to take to the cottage was a pity, so it was decrepit. The calculation of the groom's parents was as follows. Pretending to be the last of the poor, Archie and Diana would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They would make a fool of their son in front of Alice, who, as the mother thought, was already counting their money in her mind, and would scare off the hated matchmakers, because they were aware that their future son-in-law, the heir to the furniture empire. Imagine Archie, said Diana happily, twirling round in front of the mirror and looking at her reflection in it. They will see us, and they will realize at once that, first of all, John has cheated them, that he is not a rich man, so there is no point in pretending, and they will show their real face, their selfish intentions. And secondly, what? Impatiently asked her husband, who did not much like the idea. And secondly, they will immediately become clear that to take from us nothing. And then this Alice herself will get rid of our son. Diana deftly snapped her fingers, as if to strengthen her words, and then looked at her watch. Well, we can start. The time is just right. Having thrown a last glance at herself in the mirror, the businesswoman smiled gloatingly. Asterisk, 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 the Stones deliberately didn't show up on time. It was unprofitable for them to give the hostile party the impression of punctual, polite people, so they deliberately delayed the beginning of the meeting. Stephen was on pins and needles. He had never been so ashamed of his father's and mother's behavior. When he tried to call them, he heard the same thing every time. The device was temporarily out of service or out of range. Alice tried unsuccessfully to calm the boy down. Calm down, John. Don't be so nervous. Maybe your relatives have some urgent business. You said they are very busy people, but not to that extent. The young man shook his head. And it's never happened before that they turned off their cell phones when they went to a meeting. They couldn't both have run out of battery, could they? Stephen got up from the table and tried calling his parents again. It was no use. The son of businessman felt in his gut. His ancestors were obviously up to something wrong. But what was it? Maybe, excuse me, of course, Stephen. Something suddenly happened to them. As she said these words aloud, Elizabeth mentally scolded herself. Well, now I'm going to scare the boy. He'll run away from us. Mother, Alice looked at her mother reproachfully. She was also on her feet, stroking Stefan's nervous arm. At that moment, the doorbell rang. A little over an hour had passed since the appointed time. Phew, well, thank God, Jacob exclaimed, and hurried down the hallway to open the door and let the long-awaited guests in. A moment later, there was silence in the hallway. Stefan, feeling a nasty sucking sensation in his gut, rushed to meet his parents and was stunned. Looking at his mother's and father's clothes, Stefan felt slightly dizzy. Alice, standing next to him, noticed how sharply her fiancé had turned pale. "Well, Sonny, introduce us to your beloved." Carefully imitating the joy in her voice, Diana spread her arms in a welcoming embrace and immediately threw herself on the neck of the father of the bride. Roughly kissing him on both cheeks, she finally noticed Alice. "Oh, and you? So you are Alice and Is? How lovely. Let's hug too. Can I call you daughter?" Stefan felt as if he had been plunged into ice-cold water. His ears ached and his lungs were suddenly short of oxygen. Alice hugged her future mother-in-law politely, said hello to Archie, and together with Jacob, they led everyone into the living room. Stefan was shocked not so much by his mother's over-the-top demeanor as by her appearance. She and his father were dressed as if they were about to go to the pier to beg for alms. Diana wore some decrepit, faded dress, over which she had not hesitated to throw an even older and more dilapidated robe. Instead of pantyhose, she wore dark blue gaiters, the kind one usually wore to beat the carpet in the morning. Instead of the luxurious shoes a woman was used to wearing, his mother's feet were in old rubber boots. Stefan was willing to bet that they had tattered socks underneath. Really, the boy couldn't imagine where his parents would have gotten so many old rags on them. His father was also good. An old tracksuit, sweatpants with bubbles on the knees, and high fishing boots. On his head, Stone Sr. probably wore a big summer Panama. Well, just like a city madman, no less. Stefan stared at his parents with a mute question in his eyes, but they acted as if they were dressed like that every day. Diana asked Elizabeth and Alice the strangest and most uncomfortable questions she could think of, and Archie kept insinuating to Jacob that he could have drunk more to the health of the young, and in the village is that the way to drink in the country. The atmosphere of friendliness was kept solely at the expense of the bride's parents, while Stefan soon began to resemble a dummy in a chair, unable to change anything in the current situation. "Oh, but that bird you have is so gorgeous." Looking at the steaming turkey, Diana cooed. "You probably slaughtered it yourself, didn't you? It wouldn't be the first time you took a bird's life, would it? How do you think it felt?" Alice could hardly contain herself from laughing, but Stefan almost choked on his salad at those words. "Mom, where did you get that from?" He looked at his mother with a mixture of bitterness and indignation. "It's all right." Elizabeth tried to diffuse the situation, then smiled sweetly at Stone. "I didn't slaughter the bird myself. I bought it at the market as a regular chicken. When we had a farm, I sometimes had to butcher birds, but it's a very different process. It's much less emotional and much more technical, isn't it? I hope I've answered your question." "Very thoroughly, thank you," Diana said, wrinkling her nose. The level of nervousness and mutual misunderstanding continued to rise slowly. The more the groom's parents' speech became absurd. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and her husband looked at each other, wondering what motives Diana had in coming to dinner dressed as a homeless woman with a gorgeous shellac manicure. Did she really think that her $500 purse, now forgotten on the nightstand in the hallway, would not catch anyone's eye, as well as her husband's expensive watch, which he, however, honestly tried to hide in the sleeves of his shabby tracksuit? The Walkers, of course, immediately realized that everything that was going on, including the inadequate behavior of the matchmakers, only a prank. The only thing they didn't understand was the purpose of the joke. In any case, the parents of the bride did not want to spoil relations with the Stones at the stage of acquaintance, and therefore tried to treat their extravagant act with all the understanding inherent in them. Stefan, who was shocked by his parents' antics, noted to himself that the behavior of his future mother-in-law and father-in-law was worthy of real respect. Others, in their place, would have thrown out the careless matchmakers long ago. The Walkers, on the other hand, behaved as calmly and honorably as possible throughout the evening, and in the end they even called their future in-laws a cab when they complained that they had no money at all. "Jacob, I wish we had a place like yours, Archie jokingly patted Jacob on the shoulder. But alas, not everyone can roast a turkey. Not everyone can knead cakes. It's true, Diana said, mimicking her husband. I sometimes don't even have enough money for a streetcar fare, let alone a dinner party. Thank you for inviting us, my dears. Now we'll see each other all the time. The woman smiled dazzlingly at Elizabeth, who felt a little twitchy at the smile, which seemed a little predatory, but she was able to hold back her emotions. You are always welcome, she said, and then went to her room to order a cab for the matchmakers. When the groom's parents left, Stefan, going after them, apologized to Walker for his mother's and father's behavior, and then stayed a little longer to talk to Alice. Alice, you'd apologize to me too. I don't understand what came over them. They're completely different. Obviously, they wanted to stand it out in front of your family, but this. Alice only laughed softly, hugging her lover. Don't worry, I don't know what the older ones have in their heads. Maybe they are jealous of me. The main thing that we found out today, your mother has a great sense of humor. I have not laughed so much for a month, honestly. The bride assured the guy that in their relationship nothing will change, despite this embarrassment with dinner only if he himself felt calm and confident next to Alice and her parents. As long as you are not shy with me, everything is fine, she told him honestly. The rest will somehow, yes to settle. Alice, you are the best. Stefan exhaled and kissed her softly, then hurried downstairs, following his eccentric family. Stefan did not say a single word in the cab, but glumly looked at his father and mother, who, by that time, had already gone out of character, and seeing his son's mood, also preferred to spend the rest of the road in silence. Diana was very glad in her heart. It seemed to her that her number had produced the desired effect on Walker, and now they themselves would hurry to disassociate from such relatives as the Stones could become for them, and their daughter in turn would begin to look for a new, even richer victim. Archie was quite satisfied with his game. He liked his son's bride, of course, and her parents appeared to be decent people, but a poor little house like the Walker family had would be hard to find. How were they all going to live there? Of course, the wife was right. At the first opportunity, the parents of the bride will certainly want to move to the luxurious estate of the Stones. But now they will not be able to do this. The father of the family counted on the fact that the father and mother of Alice, recognized in the parents of the groom poor even more than they themselves, come to their senses and do not want to breed poverty. The man hoped that the Walkers could talk their daughter out of a hasty and unnecessary wedding. None of the parents thought at that moment what it was like for their son. Stefan was really worried about the impression that his mother and father had made on his white parents, and he couldn't wait until they were inside the walls of their house so that they could finally dot the I's and cross the T's. Late that night, there was a real scandal in the Stone household. Oh my God, I can't believe you do such a thing. I love her, Stefan shouted in anger. Stefan's mother stood in the middle of the room with her arms folded across her chest, just as her son had done not so long ago. Stefan, calm down. Son, we did it all for your sake, to keep you away from the influence of this family. What are you talking about, Mom? What influence? You should have been dragged out of there by the collar. You were acting like two crazy people. The guy was pacing the room, waving his hands at every sentence. You better be careful with your words, son, the father threatened. I don't doubt that we may have gone a little overboard somewhere, but it was necessary. Have you seen how they live? I wouldn't be surprised if in a month the ceiling collapses on their heads at night. The place is in a state of total disrepair. So what? Where do you think they'll run to if that happens? To us, of course. And even if they do, so what? Are my wife's parents not worthy of sheltering in a cabinet maker's house? Or am I completely out of my depth and only members of the royal family are allowed to stay here? Diana theatrically clasped her hands. Come to your senses, son. Have you seen your Alice, so to speak, with the naked eye? No, but I have. I've been watching her all evening, and I want to tell you something. That Alice of yours is a tramp. Don't you talk about her like that, Mom. Dad, I don't care about her, but what about you? Do you think your behavior at Walker's is normal too? Dad thought for a moment before answering. After all, he was a respectable man, and such pranks could have a bad effect on his business reputation. Finally, he said, Stefan, I'm sorry, but Alice is no match for you. Your mother is right. I'm not saying that she's bad. I'm just stating a fact. You're from different worlds, son. Different layers of the social pie, if you want to use that term. The kid's frozen in place. He didn't expect such a betrayal from his family. Well, then I'm from the other world too, father. I'm leaving. I'm going to live at Walker's with Alice in their emergency housing. Are you kidding me? Well, let's see how many days you'll come running back, son, the mother said. Unless they feed you turkey every day. As soon as those words were out of her mouth, Diana immediately regretted what she had said. Her son looked at her with genuine contempt. I'd rather live with simple but honest farmers and the girl I love than to live under the same roof with snobs like you. The mother pressed her palm to her face in surprise, and the father, on the contrary, suddenly became furious. How dare you call us that? Your mother and I have done everything to give you the best toys, the best education, the best prospects. Mind you, Stephen, if you leave now, you won't get a penny of your inheritance. I'd rather give it all away to orphanages than feed some beggars. Not a single vein trembled on my son's stony face. Well, give it away. Give it all to the children. Maybe then, and really then, some good will come of this money. It's all tables and chairs. Good luck. Your low-life son goes to live with an unwanted farmer fiancé. Finita la comedy. With these words, Stephen bowed jokingly to his parents and, cursed by his father, quickly disappeared behind the doors of the manor. At that moment, Diana regretted for the first time in all her time what she had done with her son's life. But she could not change anything she had done. For a while, she stood in the middle of the living room, listening to her husband cursing at Stephen, and then slowly retreated to her bedroom. It took her a few hours to realize that they might never see their beloved child again. Despite her parents' protest, Stephen and Alice's wedding took place. Exactly 1 month after the young man left his father's house in a modest cottage, Walker celebrated a quiet but beautiful celebration. The house was decorated with many colorful balloons and real wildflowers. Alice loved them very much. The wedding may not have looked as luxurious as it could have if Stephen had his parents' money, but the general atmosphere of the festivities was favorable to him. Home cooking, friendly and so simple relatives of his young wife, nice sit-downs in the summer kitchen to the sound of a 6-string guitar, good old songs about people and their sincere love in the difficult post-war time. It is hard to say what in all this touched Stephen most of all, the warmth of the overall atmosphere, or the pulling feeling of regret deep in his heart. The only ones who were not among the guests of his and Alice's home that day were his parents. As hard as it was to admit, Stephen still missed his father and mother here. He would have loved to share this wonderful moment of growing up with them, to see the tears in Diana's eyes and the reassuring smile on Archie's face. But alas, they had made their own choices. 3 weeks before the ceremony, the Stones received a written invitation to their son's wedding in the mail. A simple envelope of heavy paper and a cheap card with white lilies could not convince the father of the family that their son has already grown up. In the end, even though the mother wanted to go to the wedding and forgive everything to her bad John, Archie decided otherwise. It's all right, let him suffer a little. It's good for him, the businessman said in an iron voice, and crumpled the thin card in his strong fist. He wanted his independence, his freedom, so let him enjoy it without our participation. So it turned out that his parents ignored Stephen's invitation and decided to teach him a lesson. They still hoped that he would come to his senses and leave his compromising fiancée and return home at the last moment, back to the family nest. However, 1 month passed, then the second, then the third, and the prodigal son did not return. Trouble came when he was not expected. One day, Archie unsuccessfully bathed in the pool and managed to catch bilateral pneumonia. The disease developed rapidly and in a few days literally baked the unfortunate businessman. Feeling that he himself is not able to cope with this overpowering disease, the man still decided to lie down for long-term treatment in a private clinic, where he promised to put him on his feet. But only a miracle, even for a very large amount of money, and did not happen. The condition of Stone Sr. every day only worsened. Then the doctors were forced to put him in an induced coma. Diana found herself all alone, face to face with her husband's business, and here the woman is not on a joke scared. There came a moment when the case of her husband and her entire family really became no one to pass. Suitable candidates, even for temporary management of the company, was not even close. And those who were available did not have the necessary for Stone's share of professionalism. The businesswoman was forced to put all production on pause. She hoped to somehow hold out until her husband will not get better. Unfortunately, as often happens in such situations, the forced downtime of the company was immediately used by Archie's unscrupulous partners. At the general board of directors, the general owner of the company was decided to recognize temporarily incapacitated, which meant that any of the owners of shares from among the managers of the company could safely sell their shares and profitably get out of the unprofitable business. As you know, sharks are the first to smell blood, and therefore, in just a couple of months, the company was completely torn up and sold off, as a result of which, there was nothing left of the prestigious business of the Stones. Diana tried to fight as long as she could. She appealed to all her husband's friends and business partners from among those who just a couple of years ago proudly said that they were acquainted with the Stone family. But now everything has changed. No one wanted to hear about the businessman lying in a coma and had almost no prospects for recovery. The woman did not immediately realize the fact that her family was absolutely devastated. The money was barely enough to pay the bills for the house, but even this stream threatened to dry up at any moment. At the same time, the debts for Archie's treatment only increased, and soon, Diana was forced to mortgage their beautiful house just to be able to keep her husband alive. It was only now that the impoverished businesswoman realized the true cost of her cherished friendship of the elites and praised mutual assistance, which in fact turned out to be an empty sound. At that moment, when Diana was sitting on the alisand of her mortgaged house and bitterly lamented so unfairly treated her fate, in the pocket of her jacket suddenly rang the phone. "Hello," she sobbed into the receiver. "Who is this?" "Diana, it's Elizabeth, your son's wife Alice's mom. Remember her? You asked me about the turkey at the dinner party." There was silence for a moment, and then Stefan's mother literally howled into the phone. Of course I remember you, Elizabeth, sweetheart. How are you doing in there? How's John?" "Guy, if you only knew what's happened here. That's why we're calling Diana." Jacob took the phone from her. "We know what happened. We'll be there soon, and we'll bring Stefan and Alice. We've had enough of holding grudges against each other." The happy and grateful woman cried again. So Elizabeth had to comfort her emotional relative. A couple hours later, a huge pearl gray SUV pulled up to the Stones estate. Diana thought at first that her eyes were mistaken or that someone had mistaken the address, but nothing could convey her surprise when she saw her sister-in-law's parents behind the wheel of the expensive car. A second later, Alice and her husband easily slipped out of the car and rushed to her mother. Mommy, I'm so happy to see you. Forgive me for being stubborn, but I love you both so much." Stefan hugged his mother, covering her hot face with his son's kisses, but she just held him as tightly as her old arms would let her. John, my boy," she whispered back. Finally, when mother and son were able to pull away from each other, it was time for Diana to apologize to Alice and her parents. "Forgive me for all this masquerade. I was quite stupid then, though here's the age already, but apparently, God did not give intelligence, did not teach to distinguish for a lifetime where the gold and where guilt." Fortunately, matchmakers did not hold a grudge against her. They specially came to help her and her husband in trouble, and at the same time and reconcile, forgetting all the wrongs, and rejoice together in the happiness of their children. "Don't get upset, Diana," Jacob waved at her. "You know, it's not worth remembering what happened before. Why don't you tell me what happened here that you didn't even have a home? I've heard a little bit about Archie being in a coma and how your house is on the line, but I'd like a little more detail, so I'd know how to help you." The woman was very surprised at this turn. She looked questioningly at her son and daughter-in-law, but they only smiled. "I'll tell you, of course, but how can you help me, Jacob? With all due respect, it's a very nice car, but where did you get it, by the way?" The Walkers only grinned, sensing the curiosity in their relative's voice. That's when it turned out that they were farmers, but on their accounts had a multi-million-dollar fortune. For many years, the Walker family owned the meat concern for the production and procurement of various types of meat. Few people knew that the meat kings are not accustomed to boast of their wealth. skillfully playing the role of simple-minded natives of the village. Keeping in the shadows, they, however, all these years successfully conducted their business, and in the same way accustomed and native daughter. Alice was accustomed, from childhood, in everything to rely solely on their knowledge, because she knew that money, the value of very fickle, and at any time, at the slightest mistake, they can be nothing left. That was why she had been so moved by Stephen's offer to pay for the laboratory destroyed in the fire. The rector of the university was one of the few people who knew very well what kind of family Alice Walker came from. Where Alice Walker came from, she could have paid off the repair of the laboratory with just one payment, but the rector would have thought of something else to get more money out of the rich student. But the guy's selflessness and his sincere willingness to help told the girl that she could always rely on this man, no matter how much money she had. Diana was frankly shocked by the story of Alice and her relatives. It turns out that it was they who fooled the family of cabinet makers with their modesty and simplicity, and not vice versa. She thanked God and fate itself for sending such wonderful and caring people to help her, and immediately repented of her own intolerance and snobbery. Having embraced and forgiven each other, the matchmakers began to act. First of all, the Walkers paid for Archie's operation, which was successful and allowed to bring the man out of a medically induced coma. The businessman was quite surprised to hear the side of his wife and newfound relatives. After learning that the matchmakers really saved his life, Zavialov also repented and sincerely apologized to his sister-in-law's family. After that, the Meat Kings threw all their energy, connections, and a lot of money to rebuild Stone's business. Archie, who was at this time in long-term rehabilitation, as he could for his part, helped to pull his own business out of bankruptcy. Of course, a lot of things were irretrievably destroyed, but they still managed to restore something. Now the spouses have a much smaller company, which helps them learn to live within their means and to value every ruble they earn more than before. But with their relatives, the Stones maintain the most reverent and kind relations. They often visit each other and do not hesitate to receive Walker in his own, now more compact, cottage built, by the way, just next to the house of the children. In addition, both families are now expecting a new miracle, which should happen in the next 9 months. Alice turned out to be pregnant and will soon give her parents and parents of her favorite husband a wonderful grandson or granddaughter. The girl has not had an ultrasound yet, so everyone is in for a big surprise.